All right, so I want to thank you all for being here, both in person and online. Tonight's talk, laws of speedy recovery. For those in person, I'll let you hijack it and tell me which way you want to go. That is the positives of being here in person, is that you can actually interact with me online. We do not do that because we want to give preferential treatment to the people who do put in time and energy to actually show up. So, as I always say, my goal here is not just to have you learn, but to have you learn and teach somebody else. Have you learn and change somebody else's life. So if we learn anything today, please tell as many people as you can that you know something new that can change their lives. So with that being said, with laws of a speedy recovery, do we want to learn about brain health recovery or body recovery or both? You guys got to choose.
Both.
Both. Oh, I want to do it. Brain. Okay. So both is what I'm hearing. Okay. So we got both. So what we're going to look at is where we get common breakdowns that will slow us from healing. We're going to first look at how the brain develops, how the body feeds back into the brain, and how that system communicates. And when we have enough time, then I'll get into the systems that we need to control to actually make sure that we can heal. So first off, we're going to be looking at the brain. And we're looking at it from the side. So this is where your eyes are going to be. This is the back of your head. It's going to be your neck. This little area back here, that's your cerebellum. And when we look at the brain, we need to understand how it grows. So the brain grows from the bottom up, back to front, right to left, forward, and inside out. So bottom to top, what does that mean? Brainstem to frontal lobe or prefrontal cortex. Back to front, occipital to frontal lobe. So what we're seeing is the end function of proper neurodevelopment is frontal lobe development. So prefrontal cortex, frontal cortex, that's executive, controlling how we feel. How do we manage stress? Do we manage stress this inadvertently, or can we actually manage it correctly, and so forth? So this is normal neurodevelopment. At different ages, we want to see different things happen. So what happens is when we're developing, the first thing that happens is we can move our head. When we start moving our head, that is cerebellum, motor cortex controlling that. As we move, the more the brain actually stimulates the frontal lobe. So I want you to understand something. When you're born, literally there's no frontal lobe. Like you have no executive center when you're born. That's why you don't have memories until about age 2. Like there's nothing there. It's just growing. The reason we sleep so much when we're young is we're actually growing the brain. Yes, we're growing other parts of our body, but we're literally growing the brain. So when people are born, you have to think that their skull actually compresses and then opens up. So it compresses because there's literally nothing in the frontal lobe. So that's mainly brainstem and cerebellum and a little bit of midbrain. So that's why the whole skull can compress and open up. And those are those soft spots that you have on babies. That's so the head can actually compress and open up. How that head opens up will have a huge determinant of how easy the rest of that child's life is going to be. So if that child is lucky enough to be born and the head opens up perfectly, they have a bigger space or cavity to grow more brain. If it doesn't open up correctly and there's overlaps, the correlation to size of cranial vault or how much space is in there and developmental issues is directly correlated. The more asymmetrical your face and your head is, the more developmental issues you're going to have. So what we want to see is it open up correctly. So what is one way that we can literally augment, change the direction of a person's life forever is get them checked. And if their skull isn't properly aligned, get their skull adjusted from 0 to 6 months of age. because you can literally change it. You can mold the skull and make it perfectly round. The body wants it to be round. But if it isn't, because it's stuck overlapping, you're going to have underlying issues. So with that, the kids I love taking care of is no symptoms. I just want to make sure my kid's skull is going to be formed correctly, so I know they're not going to have developmental issues, motor issues, thinking issues, and so forth. Because if it's off, you can have things like where the skull doesn't form correctly, one eye is in front of the other, and then you can have vision tracking issues. And that can lead to things like dyslexia or learning disabilities. Or and that can literally change cranial nerve function. Or you can have skull deformations that changes blood flow. And so we can see that literally just that rudimentary, how is the skull formed, is really important. So the ones that are scary to me is you see the kids with the helmets on, because with the helmet, you're compressing the skull to try to change it, when in fact, what you need to do is release it. So the compression will actually make it fuse the wrong way. It's really, really scary. Because when we adjust the child, we literally barely touch them. We're literally putting like 10 millimeters of mercury. We're barely putting the weight of a dime on the areas. But when we do this, we can actually rotate the keystone of the skull, which is called the sphenoid bone, and it will actually open up and the skull will actually start moving. Because every time you breathe, it actually pushes cerebral spinal fluid, and you walk, pushes cerebral spinal fluid in, and the skull is supposed to actually torque and move when you breathe and move. So if it's working correctly, it will actually open up and start moving correctly. And then as you get older, into like that first year, it'll start fusing. And when it fuses correctly, we know it's okay. But if it fuses incorrectly, now we're going to have some issues. This is just anecdotally how when you look at people, you're like, oh, that person's really attractive. It's actually how symmetrical they are. So the more symmetrical the person is, the more attractive they are, which is correlated to how easy of a birth they have and how healthy they're going to be. So if they had a hard birth and they're asymmetrical, that means that person has a weaker immune system. That means that person with their asymmetrical is more prone to disease. So literally when we look at attractiveness on people, it's symmetry, which can be directly correlated to skull. And if you're just doing it on a purely, I want my kid to have a better, easier life, make their face more symmetrical and they'll be more attractive. And it's been shown the more attractive you are, the easier life is. So if you want to just make it so their life is easier, just do it for that reason. But if you want to do it to actually make it so they function better, so they have a better immune system, skull symmetry is really, 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 really important. Or what do you say, Doc, but I'm past that age. My skull's fused. What do I do now? Well, after your skull is fused, now what we have to do is we have to work on the function of the neurology. So the function can actually be changed. You can actually change how the brain is made and fused for the first 10 years of their life. That's when the new neurons are actually all being grown and connecting. Then, after 10 years of life, then a lot of the pruning will happen, and then you're just going to try to reinforce the brain correctly. So the easiest way to change somebody's trajectory is set their skull correct. Then you're literally setting them up for life. So why do I want to adjust kids? So they don't get sick when they're 30, 40, 50, 60. Not because they have aches or pains. We want them to have that symmetrical skull so their frontal lobe can grow correctly so their immune system will work correctly. Then what we want to look at is skull's good. Then if the skull's good, then we want to make sure it develops correctly. So what do? We make sure that they're getting the right information in and so forth. So what you need to understand is what are indications, what are things that will actually lead to increased neurodegeneration and increased problems, loss of special senses, and loss of stimulation. So the brain is a reactionary mechanism. The information that your body produces tells your brain what's going on, and then your brain determines how to react to it. So if it's getting bad information in, it's not going to get a good response. So what happens is, and we see this with people with the age or if they have major trauma, if you lose something like hearing, you get huge neurodegeneration. Lose something like sight, huge neurodegeneration. There will be an uptick in other parts of the brain, to try to compensate. So your other senses like kinesthetic may improve to try to deal with it. But that is really hard because 40% of all the information coming into your brain is visual. So that means if your visual's off, we got major issues. Auditory's off, we got major issues. Kinesthetics off, major issues. So you want to make sure that information is coming in correctly. But where does that all start? That all starts in the brainstem. So when we test, we actually look to see if you have a reflex that is telling me that that is not working correctly. There is a very distinct way that these people walk if they have a retained 18R reflex. If you see this, this person has major issues. Usually we don't see high retained, like full-on retained reflexes. We'll see various degrees. But when the person walks, what we want to see, if you have a proper movement, is opposites. When you see a child or a person walking like this, you have a retained 18R reflex, which is atonic neck reflex, which means their special senses are not working correctly, which means they're going to have hearing, seeing, or feeling problems. But what does that mean? That means their brain is not going to work correctly because they can't take in the information correctly. They're going to have major issues. So you want to stay healthy, you got to take in information correctly. If you don't take in information correctly, we've got problems. Does that make sense? So then what we look at is how is the information transferred from the brain to the body and back. So when we're working correctly, we're getting good information in and back and so forth. What is the number one nerve that has to work correctly for you to heal?
Vegas.
That is correct. We are winning knowledge. It is the vagus nerve. Now, this is how scary this is what I see. 95% of everybody who comes in here, their vagus is fatigued. No wonder they can't heal. The vagus nerve literally drives how well the brain communicates to the organs in the body. But this is something that's really, really, really important. Have we all heard of neurotransmitters before? Yes? If we haven't, what neurotransmitters are, they are the hormones in the brain or the chemicals in the brain that allow the brain to communicate. So an example, serotonin is the neurotransmitter that is mainly produced on the right side of the brain. It's used for drive. It's used for connection. It's also used for stress management. It's used for pain management and so forth. So if you've ever heard of somebody getting given an antidepressant because they have pain, it's actually because they upregulate the serotonin for a short period of time, and then the pain won't feel as bad. Long-term use isn't good, but for short-term, you can actually do okay. So that's serotonin. You got dopamine. Dopamine is more pleasure, more left brain, but it's also finishing things. Serotonin is more drive, dopamine is more finishing. So starting serotonin, finishing dopamine. And also the happy feelings we're going to get with the dopamine. But then we also have other ones like acetylcholine. That's used for muscle contraction, but it's also used for memory. Yes.
Oxytocin?
So oxytocin, yeah, the love hormone, the connection, yep, 100%. That's not a common driver for most people, but it is definitely there. Then we have like dopamine, or not dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine. That's like ability to focus, but it also controls blood sugar regulation. And then we have GABA, which helps with brainstem regulation. So all these neurotransmitters are going to help us actually communicate and function correctly. Guess what the vagus nerve's job is to do? Move them from the gut to the brain. So what happens if that nerve is fatiguing? It literally won't move the neurotransmitters. So what is the side effect? What's the side effect of any of those neurotransmitters not being correct? Anxiety, depression, sleep issues, pain issues. Name any of the problems that people have psychologically, and it can literally be from vagus nerve function not working correctly. So how do you test to make sure it works correctly? Well, if you've ever had me do the gag test on you, that's how you test it. So why is that? Well, the vagus nerve is majority stimulation or sensory. It's 60% sensory and 40% motor. Motor means going out, controlling the organ function. Sensory means going into the brain. The sensory aspect of the vagus nerve is the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. What does that mean? The very back of your tongue. The inside and the back of the roof of your mouth, like the very back 1/3 of the mouth, tongue, and the throat. So that's the vagus nerve. So if I can take a Q-tip and touch the back of your throat and you do not gag, it means the sensory nerve is not working correctly because you are not responding. You should have very easy gag reflex. If you don't, it's letting me know we have a problem. If it's hyper reactive, it means that your body is so stressed out that it's literally trying to calm itself down. And we'll see this sometimes happen with people with head injuries, that they'll have a hyper reactive or overreactive gag reflex. So put the brush in, toothbrush, whatever, touch the back of your throat. You should be easy. If you like have to jam at it a lot, that's not good. That means that nerve is fatiguing and we got to make it work. Why do we need to make it work? Because its job is to move the neurotransmitters to brain. Its job is to control all the digestive tract. Everything from stomach, swallowing. If you're like, well, I have a swallowing issue, that tells me you have a vagus nerve issue. I have a heart issue, vagus nerve issue. I have a stomach issue, vagus nerve issue. See where I'm going with this? Bladder. Bladder is actually a little different. Bladder is actually sacral issue. But pancreas, gallbladder, liver, small and large intestine, spleen, gallbladder, all of that is swallowing, all of that, heart is all controlled by the vagus. So if it's not working correctly, we can see we can get a lot of issues. Have we ever heard of POTS? Postural orthostatic hypertension. It means when people stand up, their heart beats too fast and then they get high blood pressure and then they pass out. That's a vagus nerve issue. There's a lot of these issues coming up because people have been so stressed. The vagus nerve is the brake. And if the brake burns out, the car goes too fast and you start burning out your body. Making sense? So if the vagus is working correctly, you heal. If the brain is working correctly, you can heal. What are things that will interfere with how quickly these things can heal? Stuff that drives inflammation. So what are the things that will drive inflammation in our brain and our body?
Bacteria.
Bacteria can, but I want to go with like the base things that we need for living. So what is something that we need to do at least 12 times per minute?
Breathe.
Breathe, that's right. So if we don't have enough oxygen, we die, right? And that's because oxygen is used. Why are you going to do that? Side note. If somebody yawns and you yawn with them, that's a vagal nerve issue. That means your vagus is actually working. If it doesn't, it means you have a reaction that doesn't. It means your vagus is fatigued. Where are you on?
I didn't see it.
All right. So where are we at?
What drives inflammation?
Breathing.
What drives inflammation? Oxygen. So if we have low oxygen, that means we can't make energy correctly in the Krebs cycle or the little mitochondria, the energy pieces of the body. So if our oxygen is below 97, we have inflammation in the brain. If our oxygen is below 95 in the body, we have inflammation in the body. Yeah, but I've been told it's okay, I can function at 90. Yeah, you can function, but it's not optimal. You can drive your car with a rim and not a tire. It doesn't mean it's good for it. That's what they're telling you. Yeah, but it still works. Yeah, until it falls off. Until you've got so much inflammation, it just falls apart. And that's what will happen is that you won't have enough oxygen to run the Krebs cycle or the energy cycle, and you won't break down food correctly, and you'll have a bunch of free radicals or inflammation builders that will happen, and then you'll start breaking down. So the number one thing that needs to be working correctly for you to heal and keep healing is to have enough oxygen. What's number two? Blood sugar. Blood sugar is huge. blood sugar literally is an indication of how well your body can adapt. It tells us about multiple organ systems, how they're working. What we want to see is your blood sugar run between 85 and 100. Never go above, never go below. If it goes above, it's bad. It means you are insulin insensitive and you're starving the cells. It means the cells are not getting enough energy because they're not getting glucose in and they're being starved. If it goes below 85, it means the cells are not getting enough energy and they're getting starved because the sugar is too low. So both high and low sugars will cause the same problem. Not enough sugar in the cell. So what happens is so when you eat food, your blood sugar spikes up and then it's supposed to come down. That's normal. If you are insulin insensitive, what's supposed to happen with insulin? You eat food, blood sugar comes up, then it comes down. That's healthy. If, on the other hand, you have what's called insulin insensitivity, that means the receptor sites on the cells do not respond to insulin and make the channels open, the GLUT4 receptors, so you absorb sugar. Then what will happen is the blood sugars go up, 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 up. And then what happens is your body goes, well, we need to make that go down. So the insulin goes up, 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 up. And then you have to produce more insulin to finally make the sugars come down. So you have these spikes and drops. So what happens with that spike? It goes above that 100 mark. So that tells me that if our blood sugar goes above 100, we have insulin insensitivity. That's not good. That's not good at all. Then what happens is the insulin will eventually come down. But we want the insulin and sugar to basically look the same. Then there's another hormone called glucagon, and its job is to make sugar from the liver. And what we want to see with it is the exact opposite. We want to see it go down and then up. So we want to see it making less sugar when you eat more sugar. So this is normal. But if it spikes, then what happens is you will get what are called glycolylated end products. What that means is sugar will start attacking to different parts of your body. So if your sugars stay high enough, they will attach to proteins in the food, to cells, and so forth. So if we, what'd you say?
To hemoglobin.
Hemoglobin, yeah, so that's your hemoglobin A1C. Albumin, different food proteins. Here's the problem. When you do that, the body sees it as a new thing that isn't you. It's foreign. So now it can attack it. Now you can get an autoimmune disease. But it also makes these products that are sticky. So albumin and so like parts of the blood, they get sugar stuck to them, become sticky, and now they'll clog up your arteries. And that's how you start getting the plaquing. You'll also get a buildup of these products, and they will start destroying any small cell that is sensitive, like your eyes and your nerves. That's why diabetics have eyes and nerve issues, small cell issues, all those things start dying. So the goal is to have the blood sugar stay the same all the time so that you won't get inflammation. If we get chronic inflammation, everything starts breaking down. The other issue is every time you spike insulin, chronic insulin spikes produce tumors. So cancer, we don't want that. So we want blood sugars to stay the same. So if we have the sugars stay the same and they don't go too high or too low, everything's okay. If they go too high, like I'm explaining to you, you get a buildup of all these glycolylated end products. That means sugar plus something. And then they can break down your kidney, break down your heart, break down the walls, break down your eyes. And you get all these things and you get chronic inflammation. So you go, okay, well, what does this mean, doc? This means if you drink alcohol and the next day you hurt all over, this is what you're dealing with. Your blood sugars are spiking and you're having a buildup of glycolated end products, and that's why you have inflammation all over your body and you hurt all over. Make sense? You eat pasta, you get the same thing, same problem. If you eat food and you get inflammation the next day, that tells me that the food is going through your gut and it's leaking, it's building onto stuff, and now you're getting chronic inflammation wherever those molecules that you digested went. So chronic inflammation is literally the thing that decreases healing. Well, it can't be that I ate a steak and it caused inflammation. Yeah, it literally could be if you're an adrenal body type. So you're telling me I eat a little handful of Sour Patch Kids and I can literally have pain the next day? Yes, I'm literally telling you that. Because you can boost the blood sugars. If you want to know what's going on, the easiest way to know is to get what's called a continuous glucose monitor, and it will tell us if you're having too much spikes or drops. And then we'll know why you're chronically inflamed. We don't need to guess. So is our oxygen okay? Yes, then we'll heal. Do we have right blood sugars? Yes, then we'll heal. Then when we train you, everything will respond correctly. If we're not, then we got issues. But if the blood sugar is too low, we got other issues. That means we have a problem turning fat and protein into sugar. That's called gluconeogenesis. And that tells me we have a liver fatigue issue or an adrenal fatigue issue. So people who are chronically stressed can burn out their adrenal cortex and their adrenal medulla and literally stop them from making catecholamines, which makes you make more sugar. So people with chronic stress get fatigued because they can't make enough sugar and their blood sugar runs low. So these are the people who are chronically inflamed, but they're really thin. So they're really, really thin because they don't make enough of those hormones to make more blood sugar when their blood sugar goes low. What makes them get sick? Their blood sugar runs below that 85. So now the cells are starved, and then you get inflammation. Because they're starved, and then they start dying. And when they die, your body has to break them down. That's inflammation. Make sense? So if your oxygen and blood sugar are healthy, we know you can heal. Yes, I want you to eat right. Yes, I want you to drink the right things. But these are the underlying things that most people miss. 9 times out of 10, vagus nerve isn't working, oxygen or blood sugar isn't under control. We get those things changed, it will literally change 90% of people's lives. The last one is cortisol. Is that under control? That's a blood sugar booster, but it goes up because when you're stressed, you push up your cortisol. So is your hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis working correctly? If it isn't, we can burn out that. Blood sugars go up or down, and we get issues as well. So emotional stress is the number one driver for cortisol. So if you wear that glucose monitor and it goes above 100, insulin insensitivity, that means type 2 diabetes is on its way. If it drops down and it goes below, that tells me adrenal fatigue, liver issues. So they're both bad. Yeah.
You get cortisol production from exercise.
You'll get mild cortisol, but that's because when you're exercising, you need more energy. So when you're exercising, you need more sugar because your body's using it. Yes. So you'll have cortisol and you'll have gluconeogenesis. You'll start burning it. Mainly the liver is going to be doing a lot of that when you get past, if I remember correctly, it's like 5 minutes of exercise because you're going to go through your different energy cycles. Mm-hmm. Direct ATP, then you're going to go into your glycogen stores in the muscle, and then you're going to get into oxidation, which means you're taking in oxygen and turning the fat and protein into energy. So that's when you start going really, really good. And if you keep going long enough, the runner's high you actually get is actually from the cortisol coming out, or not cortisol, the norepinephrine, epinephrine coming out with mild dopamine. And that's why you get the runner's high is actually when you're starting to burn the fat, like just fat. You have no reserves from anything else. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. So we want this to fluctuate correctly. And if it does, you heal. If it doesn't, both sides are bad. If you think you have a problem, ask the staff or me, and we have a little reference where we can tell you to go. And you can get the monitor and you can see what foods are doing to you. We just had a young kid, 16, and he had chronic vertigo and chronic ringing in the ears. Checked everything. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Everything's looking fine. Had him put on the continuous glucose monitor. Every time he ate, his blood sugar went to 150. And he's 16. And then it would drop all the way down to 70. So basically, his cells in his brain are starving. And he's getting that because his nerves are literally dying. And he's having degeneration. So we had to modify his diet a little. I'm like, it's really simple. Find the foods that are spiking and don't eat as much as that. Find the foods that balance you and start eating that. That's literally all you do. It's not hard. We had him do that, and within 2 weeks, the vertigo, ringing in the ears, Meniere's stuff is gone. But if you ran a glucose test on him, it would say he's normal. His A1C would not be high. It's just spikes and drops. That's what's causing the issue. But then he's running in the middle most of the time. But the spike and the drop is what's causing the major problems because his cells are starved when that's happening. Make sense? So sugar's under control, cortisol under control, emotional, and oxygen under control, you'll heal quick. The one that we commonly see is oxygen and blood sugar. It's like 95% of people. Then you throw in the emotional one, now you're like 99. Then you might have some outliers where we have some gut issues or neurotransmitters and other things, but it's mainly those three. That's most of the people where the problems are and why they won't heal. And then you got to make sure that frontal lobe is working correctly, get adjusted, stimulate that brain, and then you'll be able to deal with the stress better and adapt better. This is what's going to heal you. If your brain is working correctly, your body will work correctly. But if you're driving inflammation because your oxygen, blood sugar, or cortisol is out of control, you're never going to heal. You go, well, my blood tests are normal, but I have a problem. Yeah, the tests are normal for static markers, but what about dynamic ones? Are we measuring multiple times? Before this continuous glucose monitor, what we would have to do is have you go to a lab every hour for 4 hours and test you after you ate some sugar and see what it would do. And that's expensive. Now, literally, you just put the thing on the back of your arm and you get a watch. Now you're in control. Do we have any questions? No. So, yes.
Are those monitors expensive?
No, the monitors are not expensive. For Apple people, it's $50. For non-Apple people, it's $100 for 2 weeks. And if you start playing with it right away, it's very easy to figure out what foods are causing your issues. Your body type will change it. So if you're an adrenal, salt, dairy, protein will spike it. If you're thyroid, sugars can spike it. If you're gonadal, spicy foods, and so forth. So literally knowing your body type and then what you react to will help you control your blood sugars, and then inflammation will literally drop. Then you're like, oh, all my pain went away. Yeah, it's because you're literally stabilizing your blood sugars. If it's not expensive at all. Just ask the staff and they'll be able to get you the paper. So I want to thank you all for being here. What's our takeaway? What are the 3 things that we want to have under control?
Oxygen, cortisol, and blood sugar levels.
Oxygen, blood sugar, and cortisol. Yes, we won. Thank you guys.
And get babies in before 6 months old.
That is correct. Maybe before 6 months, we can actually get that brain nice and round and that head. Yep, perfect. Thank you.